And we are officially starting. Hi. Today we're going to be, or I guess not coming in. Today we're going to be talking about hacking usability. And for me, the most important part in this talk is to make sure that you learn a few things and you want to look more into it. Okay? So, my name is Myriam, and quick profile, I like anything that's octopus related. I think they're amazing. I specialize in digital marketing, the technical parts, and whenever I'm angry, I come and talk to people about it, which is why I'm here today. I want to talk about usability. And whenever I get started with anything, since I do digital marketing, I'm like most humans. I'm going to ask Google first. So I asked Google about usability, and Google is telling me that usability started being sexy around 2010 or so, which I find absolutely amazing because to me, it's not like DevOps, it's not like Angular. It's a bit more ancient than that. So, as a quick note, this person is the reason why I got started speaking in Europe, so now I'm trolling him every chance I get. I steal his pictures illegally, and I share them with people. The main point is, you have to think about your users' needs as being part of your product goals. I mean, it's really good that the product works and that the code is clean, it's not going to explode, but there's other things you should think about. Thinking about your users' needs and putting them first when you build something means that you have increased customer satisfaction. And if I'm a happy customer, I'm going to let others know about it, and I'm going to keep being your customer. It also increases loyalty. I mean, let's think about all the Apple fanboys out there. They're very, very loyal. And the more time people spend on your website or your application, usually it correlates to more money that you make. So this is not just for profit, it's also to reinvest in other features. And you also waste less resources. And when I say resources, I mean time, patience, money, whatever else. So now I'd like to talk about tin cans. I don't know if all of you in the room know what tin cans are. I'm hoping that yes. They're the thing that you usually get your sad dinner out of. You know, you open it, dump it, put it in the microwave. Those tin cans. And the problem with tin cans is a usability problem. Why? Because in 1795, the French Directory, so a weird government, decided that it wanted to improve the military's food supply. Because, you know, that year, French armies were being assholes. That's something we know how to do very well. Full disclosure, I'm French. French forces fought in Italy, the Netherlands, Germany, and the Caribbean. I don't know how they managed all this, but apparently they had food issues. So they said, you know what, we're going to have a contest, an inventor's contest. We will pay 12,000 francs to whomever will find a solution to feed our armies. And it took 14 years to invent the tin can. And that guy got the prize money. What I find absolutely amazing is that it took 14 years to develop this, and then an additional 30 years to develop the can opener. I don't know if you realize how bad that is. Let me give you a quick reminder. Soldiers had to open their tin cans with their bayonets. This is what a bayonet looks like. So for me, if I want to, explain usability simply, usability means having to be able to use a product without stabbing it open. It sounds very, very simple, but somehow it's not, and somehow we keep failing at this, and I don't understand why, from a theoretical standpoint. When I think about it in practice, however, I do know why. I know why because usually usability is left to developers going, hey, figure it out. We know you're gonna do something. Great, but how are you supposed to be equipped to face this? So one of the solutions is to do usability testing. And there is nothing more heartbreaking than watching or a recording or a live user basically not be able to use the stuff you made. It's really, really sad. And the first stage is telling the person, you idiot, just click on the right. And then you realize, oh my God, they're wasting 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. They still can't get it done. And then you're wondering, wait, maybe it was me. Maybe I didn't think this through. Maybe I didn't think how it would be used. So there's this wonderful quote by David Orr that says that usability testing is the killing field of cherished notions. And it's really true. Whenever you test something, you're like, oh, I thought this was going to work, and it's a disaster. So let's get back to basics. Why would you want to test usability? Well, because at the end of it all, the reason why we code things is to make them useful. We want to build things that are useful. And what is useful? Well, it's utility. So does it provide the features that I need as a user? And then usability, which means how easy and how pleasant is it to use? Can I get the stuff done fast and efficiently? So with that in mind, how do you look at the core components of usability? You have learnability. How easy is it for me to accomplish what I came to do? Which oftentimes you will see posters saying, get shit done. Well, that's basically it. How efficient is it? Am I going to waste half a day to get my stuff done? How memorable is it? So memorable doesn't mean how hype, how cool. No, it's just once I learned how to do this thing, how easy is it to do it again? Will I remember? And last but not least for me is error tolerance. Like, you have to cover these up. Error tolerance means that you know that your users are going to fuck it up. It's true, it happens a lot. So you should make sure that I don't commit a fatal error when I try to use your product. It should be error tolerant. And the really last one, but that most people tend to forget is, hey, does it feel nice? Would I want to do it again? Or is it pure torture, kind of like paying my taxes online in Canada? It's, something that's important. However, whenever I talk to dev teams, this is what I hear most often. The 5 core components for me that I hear is, but it works. Yeah, I understand it works. I mean, you explained it to me for 2 weeks. Everybody that helped you on the project understands it, but nobody else. So yes, in technicality it works. In reality, no. The other problem is, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Okay, I know this was a joke once upon a time. Now I'm just so tired of hearing it. It's not. Industry standard, but it's an industry standard. That's great. I don't care about your industry if I'm a customer. I care about you solving my problem. That's it. And that does not make me stupid. That makes me a customer. It's not broken. All the unit tests pass. Yes, but no. And, oh, that's a 5-minute hot fix. Yeah, I've seen so many 5-minute hot fixes that are piled on top of each other that in the end, if I want to use it, I basically have to hack your entire product, which I've seen happen. Okay, it gets to a point where if I have to change the URL, go in the code, modify some field in the form to be able to pay something, then you're really, really off. There's an error in your product. So when it comes to usability, oftentimes you will see people go, oh, I'm not ready for this, or it's not my responsibility, or I think a team should do this. And you know what? Yeah, you're right. If you have a big budget, hire somebody, hire an entire team, go for it. But if you don't, if you have a startup, or if you are part of a team that really needs usability testing and nobody's willing to get started, well, pick up the slack, you can do it. When should you start? At each step of the design process. And by design, I don't mean, the make it beautiful part. Really thinking about the product, developing the product, planning it, testing it. Any moment, you can bring in usability testing. What can you test? Well, here are a few possibilities for you. The old design, that's something that drives me nuts personally. Oh, we don't need to test this. We're going to have a brand new one. Yeah, I can bet you good money you're going to keep making the same mistakes over and over again, no matter how fancy the technology is. You can also test the competitor's design. Believe it or not, one of the things that most people tend to forget, especially in e-commerce, when you have an internal search engine, that's something you develop as an engineer. And it can't be stolen or copied that easily. It's an investment you make. So testing the competitor's design and how it works is usually a great spot to start, especially when people don't want you to test your own product. So you can come back and go, look, they do it. Critical features. Critical features can be features that are critical for your company internally, or it can be business features. I mean, if you're selling me something and I can't go through the buying process if I use PayPal, for example, that's a problem. You can also test features you're not sure about. Like, this happens often. A marketing person will come and go, you know what? We should have this. This is super hot. Great. I'm not so sure we should invest in this. We can test it out, have a little MVP, and then, we can actually kill that thing off if it doesn't work. So who should carry the test now that we've seen what you can test? Who should carry the test? We said anybody, but where should you carry them also? So where? It can be in conference room. I would not recommend a broom closet because it's not comfortable for your users, and once again, that's a usability issue. But if you want, you can also have virtual testing, meaning that the people don't even have to be in your office. That's very easy to implement. So going back to all of this, your solution is not just one size fits all. You should think about it in terms of the company, the people within the company, the roles, the product, figuring out what works for you. Let's get into DIY testing, because if I talk about hacking it, it means getting started somewhere. And you have different types of testing that are available to you. You have formative testing, so it's while the product is in development, so you can fix the issues before it rolls out. Or you have summative testing, which is after the product is finished, to validate if the product meets requirements. I don't know if you've heard about the wonderful IoT juicer debacle recently. They basically spent $120,000 developing this Internet of Things juicer that nobody wants. In their case, I would have recommended just testing the market, testing the product during the development, not at the end while it's crashing and burning. So once again, you do it DIY, you do it your style, just figure out what works for you and what makes sense. There's a good quote that I really, really like. It's basically spend 10% of a design project's budget on usability, usually it will bring you back a lot more. So this comes from the Nielsen Group website. They're really famous for usability. And I think that this percentage may vary a lot depending on the industry, the company, the product, but it's still something to keep in mind because once again, you're making things for people to be able to use or systems to be able to use. So if it's not user-friendly and it can't be usable, you have issues. Why should you get started with DIY usability testing? Well, it integrates into the development of a product at very little cost. So you're not going to be spending a lot of money on this. It does not impact the development timeline negatively, okay? So what this means is it's not an excuse to go, oh, well, if we have to redevelop this or if we have to iterate, it's going to be complicated. No, it's not. It's not. If you do it correctly, it's not. And it can be done early and often. That's really, really important because if you're developing something and you're putting your sweat, your tears, your time on doing this thing, and it doesn't work because the users don't like it, you're going to have a hard time pivoting away from it. You're going to have a hard time admitting to yourself that it doesn't work because you spent so much time. You're already engaged. There's multiple ways you can test usability. And today we're going to be mainly talking about the scripted tests because they are the easiest, quote unquote, when you want to get started. Scripted test lets you analyze the user's interaction with product-based, set instructions. So you're basically asking people to do stuff on your website. Seems pretty straightforward. It's not as easy as it seems. We're going to look into it. But there's other types of testing that you shouldn't ignore. For example, you have decontextualized testing. And that's great when you want to validate, well, the people who are going to be buying your thing. Are they interested? What are the personas? What are their habits? Would they be interested? So you can do this with user interviews, surveys, card sorting, all that type of UX stuff. You also have natural testing. So think of it more of a A/B testing, first click testing, beta testing. So you have different things available to you, different tools, and it's closer to analytics than anything else. But it helps you figure out how people are doing things on your website. Not necessarily why, but how. And then you have hybrid testing, which is a mix of everything, and it's pretty high voltage. I would not recommend you get started right away with this. So let's start with a framework. There's plenty of different frameworks available to you when you want to get started testing. I had to pick one. I wanted to pick one that would make sense to the people I'm talking to. So we're going with something that involves, number one, you figure out your hypothesis. Where do you think there's a problem? Where do you think you could improve? Where do you think you're going to actually do really good? Identify your goals. Okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to test? Then you develop a user script, which is, the test itself. And then, and this one a lot of people forget because it doesn't feel supernatural, you have to ask for a verbal reaction. Because when people think out loud, you're going to learn a lot of things about how they think and why they're doing what they're doing on your website. And the last part is compile results and do a short recap. Compile them to know what is the priority, what do you ignore for now, what is, really, really urgent, and what do you plan on testing further? Seems pretty straightforward, except that a lot of people forgot a few steps along the way. Budget. What's your budget for this? Figure out how much money you have, because all these tools are not created equal. They don't cost the same amount. If you want to have, a friend of mine is specialized in this, she has up to 50 people wearing huge helmets, and she tests their emotions and how they navigate on a website. That's $100K per test for her. I could never afford to do that. That doesn't mean I don't do usability. I have some friends, they have the weird glasses, and they send people in stores to do usability testing on the shelves of supermarkets. I mean, it can get pretty deep and intense. So figure out what your budget is, figure out who your users are. Oftentimes, you may not notice it, but it's one of the pitfalls. The people that you are going to use as users may not represent the ones that will be using your product in the end. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Why? Because you may have situations where you will say, go with a product that's online. You want to do remote testing. What you don't realize is that the people that do the remote testing, they became professional users, kind of like professional gamers that make a living off of it. Well, these are professional users. They are getting paid to test things. So they have already hacked usability. They know how to make you happy. They know what parts they should test. But they're not necessarily the best people for you to test. So if you're going to choose these solutions, think about, who is my user? Is it a segment of users that are already in beta? Do I want to have specific people by demographics? Do I want people by age? Do I want people by language? Because you may not realize it, but language plays a huge part. I'm French, but I live in French Canada. If I'm going to develop a product for the French-Canadian market, I'm not testing with French people. Not the same kind of people, not the same habits. So don't make those mistakes. You also should think about, okay, tools, but do I want to carry it out in-house? And then do I want to have people looking into it? How do I set this up? Do I want to do this remotely because it's easier for me? And then if I do this remotely, the person in charge, are they aware that it may take up to a week to get feedback? Are they aware that it may take up to an hour? Do I want webcam recordings? What do I want? Look at all of these specificities to decide. So, officially, step one, we're in it. Hypothesis. You can choose to rely on data to create a hypothesis. And in that case, I would recommend thinking about maybe Google Analytics, heat maps, A/B testing, anything that you have access to. And if within your company you're in charge of usability testing, or you start doing it and people don't want to give you access to data, something's wrong, okay? You deserve to have access to data to understand what people are doing on your website. Then you should figure out what's working well. Define what you think is bringing in money, or bringing in users, or bringing in engagement. Define what isn't working well, and specify the improvements that could be made. So you already have your hypothesis in mind, what you're going to test. Then you move on to your goals. Business Cat really knows the goals, though. So you should identify where people get stuck. Try to pinpoint the objectives that you want your user test to accomplish. For example, I want users to be able to reserve a train ticket, which apparently the Deutsche Bahn didn't really want me to do, for example. I had to reserve a train ticket from France to Germany via the Austrian lines. Their website was way better. I could actually just reserve my thing, which is a fail for 2 websites, and the third one that has nothing to do with it actually passed. You should also clearly establish the goal of the testing. What are the main features that require feedback? And this is a bit tricky because you're going to find yourself having a huge Christmas list. And that's great. But you should keep in mind, the more objectives you want to test at once, the more room for error and misinterpretation. So take it small, make the right decisions. And remember, it's iterative, so you can test at any time and keep testing. Then you move on to developing your user script. Okay, so what are the actionable tasks that you want your users to complete? And before we look at the tasks, you should note that a script should include a short background about the website. I mean, if I'm going to be testing something, I'm a human being. Give me the context. It's something that drives me insane. Just test this. I'm like, why? And nobody will tell me why, what it is, what it's supposed to do. And you should be very, very careful about how you phrase it, because oftentimes I see that companies love talking about themselves to themselves. So if you're going to come at me with a lot of acronyms, I'm not going to understand what's happening. If you're going to describe your ideal product to somebody who's supposed to use it but doesn't know all of this, it's going to create confusion. So be careful. You should also have questions about the tester. So if these people are wondering who the tester is, what they're supposed to do in the room, what's going on, it should be implemented in there. And then you move on to 5 to 10 specific tasks. I included a link to a stereotypical, like a really generic user testing script. You can steal it, do whatever you want with it. It's really nice. The one thing that is not in my slide that you should know about the script, the one sentence you should always find a way to put in there is, remember, we're testing the website, we're not testing you. Because at its core, humans want to please. And most people will try to actually give you what you're expecting. They want to make you happy. So they're going to behave very differently than they would if they were by themselves trying to actually do the thing. So always put them at ease and make it very, very clear that you really want your product to work and that they cannot hurt your feelings, okay? Because otherwise, I've seen a few tests where the people are really, really trying to help the startup, and I was like, it's not working. We need to go remote. So I tell you that you should include 5 to 10 tasks in your test, but how do you pick the tasks? Well, there's 3 steps. You need to decide what tasks you would want. So, for example, reserve a plane ticket on a website. Then you have to formulate them. And the formulation is very tricky, and we'll look at that. The way you use words will impact how people perceive the task, okay? And then you have to be careful about their order. It has to be logical. You can't ask them to pay for the ticket when they haven't chosen the destination yet, for example. So what tasks can you get started? What can inspire you? Tasks that are important to your team or the company at large. Tasks where you predict that the user is going to have a hard time. Like, this is not perfect, but it's the best you can do. Test it out. Tasks that influence the business goals. If I can't pay on your website, that's a problem. If I can't actually fill in the information for you to contact me again, that's still a problem. Tasks that target redesigned areas. So you're really proud of the brand new thing that you've unveiled. Test it out. Or tasks that target newly added features. Not the same thing as design. It's really trying to figure out if the new features are adding value to your product. And you have different types of tasks. You have quantitative and you have qualitative. Quantitative is a closed task. It's a yes or no, pass or fail. Can you do this or not? Open is more of a sandbox, so you could ask them, hey, you're trying to look for a good curry recipe that is low in calories, for example. That's not a yes or no. I mean, for them, maybe a low-calorie curry is like 3,000 calories. So, you will have qualitative results and go, I thought that, they were diet conscious, and turns out they're not. So think about this. When you design it, you should include both. And like I said, everything presented to users during a test impacts how they respond. And a clear example of this is in a task that was designed in 2002. They found that Bollywood-style scenarios, so not instructions for a robot, really brought out a lot more emotional response, and you would get a lot more feedback. So this one, if we read it, it's your innocent and young sister is going to get married this Saturday. And you just got news, the prospective groom is already married. Shock, drama. And then you are asked, book a flight as soon as possible to find your sister and save her. Okay, I know it's dramatic, I know it's hilarious, but at the same time, I kind of feel pressured to save my sister. I kind of want to get her the plane ticket, right? Well, it's the same thing with your tasks. If you're saying, purchase a plane ticket on this website, it doesn't have the same emotional appeal as this. So I'm not saying that you have to go the Bollywood route, but if you can provide context or emotion, it will probably work. And I have a very, very good example of this. The unicorn here actually has a lot of feedback on his talks because emotional strings. You can, have problems in your code, and it's okay, you're a unicorn. So, how do you articulate these tasks? Because now that we're talking about emotions, we're talking about words, we're talking about how important it is, then you have to figure out, hey, am I doing this thing that everybody else does, which is including cues in my questions to get an answer? I think a lot of people are specialized in this by asking, hey, you don't mind eating Indian tonight, do you? Well, the cue is, no, you don't mind. So be very, very careful when you do this because you will influence people. Be realistic and avoid ambiguity. If I can't understand what's going on, or if you're asking me to reserve once again, I'm sticking with the plane ticket. If you're asking me to reserve a plane ticket with 3 stopovers that go into a country I'm not supposed to go to that is actually not getting me anywhere close, just because you want to test your feature of multiple segments of flights, I'm not going to understand as a user. I'm going to be very confused because that's not the stuff I would normally do. So be very careful about, keep it real life scenario oriented and you'll be good. Ensure that you have an appropriate amount of details. So when I say this, I mean this both ways. You can have too much details and then I'm drowning and I'm confused, or you have so little that I'm like, where do I go? That's not good enough. So trying to figure it out, write it again, have other people read it. Tasks should be designed to be independent from each other. I know this sounds normal, but most people don't realize that if you're using, the implicit cues, then people are going to think there's a specific order. But technically, they should be able to accomplish all of this on the website without jumping through hoops. So be very careful about that, except when you have scenarios of the user has to go back and forth, the user has to log in and log out. Those tasks kind of make sense to be tied together. If you need me to access something that's in the logged in portion, you should have a task right before it that requires me to log in. It's pure logic. And how do you ask for feedback, verbal feedback, not just recording people doing things? It can get a bit tricky. It can get very, very tricky because it doesn't feel natural to basically try to get into people's heads. So what do you ask? Is this what you expected to see? Or you could ask, would you recommend this website to other people? Why or why not? That's called the Net Promoter Score. You get an idea of people, if they like it or if they really, really don't for some reason. Asking non-leading questions should also help, just like, oh, hey, did you get everything done? Were you expecting this? Or, oh, how do you like using this app? And once it's over, just ask them, and I know this is a very dramatic way of asking it once again, but if they had the opportunity of redoing anything on the website, like there's just a magic wand and poof, it's the perfect app for them, what would it be? You'll learn quite a few things. Congratulations. In all technicality, at this point, you're done with the test. The problem is that the test does not end when the user stops testing. You need to compile your results. You need to compile as much information as you can, as many details, so you don't forget it. Do not be vague. Don't just go, hey, they probably didn't like the flow. The flow of what, and where, and when. So explain if it's a navigation issue, if it's the layout that's confusing on this page, that page, whatever else. Then you can prioritize your issues, and usually this is done as part of a team, so you just write everything out in little post-its, and then you prioritize. And then you include recommendations, like I recommend that this be taken care of by doing this or doing that. So this gives you a clear roadmap of, hey, we should be taking care of this in the next cycle. And this usually is a little bit confusing at first, but I promise that if you put all your post-its on a map that goes high priority, low priority, medium, whatever else, or however you want to organize it, and then you hang this by the coffee machine or by the water cooler, people within the company will give you their advice as well. Like, you will get a lot of feedback because it looks really interesting. And it's great that I talked to you about all this, but what about remote testing? What about, okay, I can't afford to have people come into my company and test it out. Well, you can choose to go the remote route, but things don't necessarily play out the same way. What do I mean by that? Well, you need to define your hypothesis, as we said previously. You need to choose the right participants, define the questionnaires, review your test, and configure your testing tools. So you'll notice that there's number 4 and number 6 that are a bit different from the framework I proposed. And this is really adapted to what's going on in terms of remote testing. You basically have an illustration for this. And if we go through it, you figure out your objectives the same way. However, the users are a bit tricky. Like I said, how do you figure out your ideal users? Well, that's something that you should do before you pick your tool, and you really need to think about it, because you can't make the mistake, for example, of choosing super users. What are super users? Well, they're the users that absolutely love your brand, your product, your whatever, and whatever you throw at them, they'll figure it out, because humans have this tendency of thinking that if something doesn't work, they're stupid and it's their fault, and it's not. So you would get a biased view of your product if you choose, the top 5% of people that are already signed up, spend money on your product, are advocating it. It doesn't reflect the generic user that you're going to have. So be very, very careful about this, because most platforms won't tell you how they recruit users, and you would get an idea of who you get, but not exactly if they fit for you. So there's that point. And as you can see, number 4, define questionnaires. It's the think out loud portion. You can't necessarily be in contact with your users, so you can't necessarily ask them these questions with your voice. So you have an opportunity. There's 3 times when you do remote testing. You have an opportunity to ask at the beginning a questionnaire. You have the opportunity to ask after they've completed each task how the task was and to get feedback. And you have an opportunity at the end of the test. So use these wisely, spend a little more time and develop questionnaires to really get the most feedback you can from your users. And then you figure out your scenarios and you set up your tool. Setting up the tool can also be a bit tricky. Does it integrate with something that you need? Does it work with the platform that you want to test? Is it in the right language? Like I said, this is often a problem. There's an additional problem that's a bit unusual. For example, in some countries, testing for accessibility, so usability for people that are disabled in some manner, is not necessarily that easy, right? And it seems like it could cost a lot of money, because then you have to bring in the token blind person to test it out in your office. That's not the case. Once again, you have to get creative in how you recruit your users, but it's super important to make sure that you have the right people. Otherwise, it's going to be problematic. So here are a few things that you should consider. And yes, I love really strange images, because usually that's how I feel when people tell me, oh, we've chosen this tool because it was really nice and I like their marketing. And I'm like, but it doesn't work. It just doesn't make sense. Prime example for me, for example, is you have a very simple website, and then you're like, you know what, I'm going to do this in Angular 2 because it's cool. I'm like, but it doesn't work for this client. Why did you do it? Oh, it seemed like a good idea at the time for me. Yeah, for you, not for your client. Same thing for your usability testing. You will have a lot of companies that will go, oh, I'm super cool and I do this and I do that, and we had this great brand and we optimized this and we got plus 100% usability on this, and you're like, does this fit my market? No. Are you going to take forever to get back to me with the test? Maybe. Oh, do you provide video recordings? Oh, no, you don't. Okay, so you really need to sit down, figure out what you need, what you would expect your test to be like, and figure out if they fit the criteria. So the criteria, for example, for me, I should be able to add participants. I'm not saying that I should be the only input in participants. If you have a pool shared with me, great. But if I want to upload a list of users that I want to set up a test for, let me do it. Give me flexibility. Same thing goes for the task choice. There are some tools that aim to be so useful that they will provide you with all the tasks, even if they don't make sense for your product, once again. So be very careful about tools that tell you we'll take care of everything, we'll automate it. No, don't let them do that. Pick tools where you can upload your tasks and ask them in the proper language that you want. This goes back to my French-Canadian thing. If your task is entirely in French, and I can't tweak it, that's going to be a problem because half of my audience is not going to understand what I want them to do because they don't use the same words. Same for speed. When I mean speed, it's not even, the platform itself, how fast does it load? No. How fast do you get back to me? If you take 1 week or 2 weeks to provide me with my data, that's problematic for me, personally. If you feel like waiting for a week, go for it, chill, I don't mind. But me, I want these things a few hours later. So think about, dig in and figure out how long it takes. And then you also have price, you have device support, and advanced feedback options. Advanced feedback options, do you want, webcam recording? Do you want the sound with this? Device, do you want laptop? Do you want mobile? Hey, you know what? Maybe we're going to have VR testing soon. So, figure out if they're enabled. So ask all of these questions before you make your choice. And last but not least, tools for you to use. So you will have a user testing script here. I'm not saying that it should be used as is, but you can check it out, download it, tweak it to your needs so that it makes sense to your users. You also have a user research plan one-pager. It's literally a one-pager. You want to get started? Here it is, guys. There's a usability testing kit also that I've included. If you don't know how to figure this out, by going on an adventure and you need a real kit, how to figure out every little piece, it's there as well. And if you want the ultimate guide to usability testing, or, has been advertised, but it's actually really, really good, go for that. There's a few services out there. So I'm not saying that you should be using these or not, which is why you have a link that says need more tools. There's a huge comparison chart. But there's a few that I like personally. So you have Hotjar. Why do I like Hotjar? Because, well, personally I use Google Tag Manager. I can implement this stuff really fast. It has a lot of features that I like, and it makes sense to me. Great. And their team is really improving a lot of stuff all the time. You have Eyes Decide. You have UserBob that I included here because I think their name is hilarious, and they actually did reach out to me for some tests. There's usertesting.com. Not the most creative name, but it gets it home. You have Try My UI. You have 5-second tests. You have one that I haven't included here because it doesn't make sense when I talk about, hacking usability, but there's Usabilia. So this is actually a very nice company. I used to include them in this list, but now they take on big clients. So if you are part of what they would consider a big corporate client, go for it. They're a very reactive team, and they really, really pinpoint problems, and they help people improve. I should know this because as a user, I dealt with some platforms I won't name, and Usabilia had them as a client, and I see a definite improvement. I mean, I don't want to rip out my hair when I go on that website, which is so much better after a good 15 years of suffering. So yeah, they have different tools. Figure out what works for you. They have mobile specific tools as well. Whatever your thing is, there's probably a tool out there for it. You just need to look into it. Thank you very much for hanging on with me. I finished a bit early, so if you have a few questions, let me know.